All right, we'll welcome in Bryan Munson of Husker Online. Bryan, I would wish you a happy bye week, except that I know recruiting never stops. So happy bye week for the rest of us, but not for you, I guess?
Oh, I don't expect the coaches out on the road this week. So I'm going to be doing my normal kind of stat check, possibly tonight, maybe tomorrow. Some of the guys don't have their stats in yet. And then I'll be doing like my regular 3 and out on Wednesday. And then I think I'll probably be carrying forward some of the news, obviously, from this last weekend. And if something else pops, there was a new 2025 offer, there's a new 2026 commitment, and obviously you'll be starting to talk about UCLA visitors and other things coming up in Wisconsin weekend, et cetera. So there'll still be some things, but it slows down a little bit, and I won't be working the phones on Saturday and all day Sunday.
There you go. I know you've been on the Connor Booth train for a while. How about the Friday night that he had?
Dude, I just got done putting his numbers in. 26 rushes for 377 yards, 14.5 per pop, 8 touchdowns. So he's actually averaging 13.1 over the course of the season. It was a monster night. I literally thought I was envisioning Bo Jackson from Tecmo Bowl. I don't recall anybody else's stats being as gaudy as that. I mean, those are eye-popping numbers. So here's something else to remember with this performance. Connor now holds the consecutive 100-game rushing record for 11-man football in Nebraska with that performance against Malcolm on Friday night. So I think the rest of them might be a little difficult for him to touch. I think actually he might have eclipsed the all-time C2 rushing record in a single game. I need to go back and take a look at some additional things here, but that's a night. That was actually 2 nights in a single night right there for him.
I know the staff is excited to have him in the fold as a local guy. Has there been any clarity on what position he's going to play? Is he for sure a running back at Nebraska?
100% running back. Okay. I mean, I wish that people – so look, I know his dad. Mm-hmm. I've known his dad for several years, went to college with him, and really, really, really good friends, tons of mutual friends, still stay in touch with him. And I have been entrusted with a lot of information that, they tell me privately, and it's tough to not want to go ahead and divulge it because it's very powerful stuff. Like, look, what I'll say to everybody is this: Nebraska is completely 100% sold on Connor being a running back. And this goes back to the other players that he was evaluated against the summer that he got the offer in particular. You got to think about the other players that were there. The other players that, of course, ended up committing to other schools. Nebraska basically stood down on other guys to get Connor in the class. And I think that people forget about the way that he performed in San Antonio at the All-American Combine earlier this January. And I think that obviously he's just not been interested in kind of trying to increase his rating and, get out and get new offers if he just would take a visit or go do a camp or whatever. I honestly believe he left a lot of offers on the table had he just shown the initiative or a little bit of interest to show up at these camps or these combines or just to take a visit. I think he could have blown up. I think there are several programs from around the country that really had Connor Booth high on their board if they could just get him to get on campus there at their school and show a little bit of interest there. I think honestly his rating could have gone up, all of his offers totals could have gone up. People are going to look at that and they're just going to sigh and they're going to think about how many times, maybe Nebraska has done this where they've taken a local kid and it's been the only offer. I just feel like Connor is just a special, different type of person and a different type of player. And I think it obviously you can even say that that it's not, that he's not the same kind of guy. It's because he's a dual sport athlete. He's going to play both baseball and football in Nebraska. So I think that quietly, very secretly, he's a hidden gem on Nebraska's commitment list for 2025.
Bryan, I personally have kind of poo-pooed the in-state, just meaning more for a lot of these players. That's why they commit. Is it true, though, that, maybe Connor Booth shut down some of his recruitment, didn't go out to more camps just because Nebraska was what he wanted? He got the offer, he committed, and he's happy, he's good with that?
100%. I mean, once things were kind of secure with Matt Rule approving the idea that he gets a chance to play baseball, and Will Bolt was in on it, to where he was going to be able to play baseball for Nebraska as well as play football. That was it. That was the package that he was looking for. He didn't need to look any further than that. I mean, and look, Connor's kind of taken, and put baseball for a little bit into the back seat. I mean, he could have gone absolutely nuts, travel all over the place, all over the country this year and travel ball. Instead, he went ahead and backed it down, played the local stuff, played Legion ball, and just didn't do to the nth degree, when it comes to perfect game tournaments, and all that good stuff. They didn't do a lot of that travel ball this summer because, Connor had some split discipline this summer, unlike what he had ever done before. Usually at the end of football time, he's into baseball time. And then at the time baseball season ends, he's really back then finally getting into conditioning and shape to play football. And it's kind of been football takes the back seat, but he played a little bit of role reversal this year so far. And I think it's actually paying off for him right now.
That's awesome. We're talking with Bryan Munson of Husker Online here. Let's stick with the skill positions here, Bryan. A commit for Nebraska in the 2026 class, Devon Bonwell. Whitty, what's to know about this young man?
I think what's to know about him is that he's been on Nebraska's radar now for 3 years. He picked up the offer in June from Nebraska. He's been developing this relationship between a couple different staffs, but he's felt a connection with Garrett McGuire and Matt Rule. He's not, that speedster guy. A lot of guys, even like Jackson Carpenter and Bryson Hayes, and those guys are 10.6. Devon is a 10.98 guy, but he's a bigger dude. He's a 6'2", 190-pound junior. I think that kind of helps lend itself to maybe, a guy that's going to be a little bit more physical, that can play outside, that can do some perimeter blocking, because Nebraska needs that a lot when it comes to helping out the run game. I like Bonwell Whitty because when I put his film on, I just don't see a guy that's just running past dudes that just uses his physical skills and his athleticism to kind of just dominate. He is technical. He gets, how he needs to get off on the football. He really goes out there and does some advanced type of a line of scrimmage get off and snap get off type of technique that you don't see from a lot of high school guys. So he's put in the time. He's developing the craft, and I think that's one of the things that's really caught Nebraska's eye, is that he's a technical kid, route runner, technical get off guy. I think that this is a really good get for Nebraska. I think it helps. I think Nebraska obviously is very much changed their tune when it comes to, 2 years ago it was all about Texas. Now I think Nebraska is reinvesting their time in the local and area kids, and I think it's going to pay off big for them.
You mentioned names like Carpenter and Hayes, but then kind of the differences between them. How important is it for a quarterback to know what his outside receivers are going to be, in terms of their speed, their skill set, and ability to get down the field, but also maybe to diversify the, types of talent you have in that room, where you do have some burners, but then also have some more possession technical guys?
I think it's absolutely critical. You cannot have a room that looks exactly the same and they all do the same thing and blah, blah, blah. You've got to have some guys that look different, that play different, and I think that adds some complexity, obviously, to when it comes to that chemistry. And there's some recognition, obviously, there that, that Raiola or whoever the quarterback is going to be, that he's going to have to recognize and understand that whoever's out there personnel package wise, just remember how things work. The difference between throwing to Barney and throwing to Bonner, or, there's obviously going to be a difference. So I think it is something, but you don't want a room that just looks, unless you got a room that's full of Marvin Harrison Juniors. I mean, then go ahead and stock up. But I mean, clearly you're going to want a room that's very diverse, that can go out there and do different things. I think it lends itself to having different opponents on every single week, and I think it helps out with gameplay.
We will move on from the recruits that are in the fold now. One that was rumored to take a visit, Bryan, Corey Sims, committed to USC. He's been on Nebraska's radar for a while. We got some rumbling that he was going to be in town for Rutgers. What fell through with that?
I don't really know. I caught up with Corey, and he was kind of evading the question about whether or not he was going to get back to Lincoln, but it sounds like USC really got him in. It was the rumor obviously popped up. The information popped up, I think, on Wednesday night, Thursday. Well, maybe it was Thursday night, Friday morning. But then by like Friday evening, it seemed like USC had done their best to get him to kind of shut it down. So whether it was NIL related, we're going to take your offer away, we don't allow guys to kind of do that. I mean, if you went over to the USC board on the On3 network, they were kind of losing their minds that they could lose a guy like that who is actually a Nebraska legacy back to the Huskers. And it's not like Nebraska hasn't done that already with like Mosey, not necessarily being a legacy guy, but being much closer to Lincoln than he is to Eugene, and obviously dad there now. So semi-legacy-ish, I guess. But I felt like it was very interesting to see how they responded. And obviously then Nebraska kind of responded on Sunday night by offering another 2025 wide receiver from, Dayton Rayola's high school there in Buford, Georgia. So I thought that was Nebraska seems pretty bound and determined that they're going to add another wide receiver to the class. The interesting part, and what kind of goes, with what we were talking about before, is that Jordan Taylor from Buford looks nothing like Sims at all. I mean, Jordan is a 5'7", 170-pound, Wandale Robinson kind of looking guy, while, Sims himself, could be more along the lines of Emmanuel Moody, or Cortez Mills, a bigger bodied, kind of wide receiver, which explains itself because of his dad playing basketball, big body guy. So, I think it's really interesting what Nebraska is doing there, but it seems like they definitely want to get another guy that's a playmaker in the class.
We have a couple texts on this subject here from our text line and comment section, Bryan. JUCO, is that a place Nebraska could go for wide receivers? And someone is asking specifically about Darion Bryant at Highland Community College.
Not going to rule it out. And I think some of the JC guys are just, that market is going to have to be something that's going to have to prove itself like over the year. It's different. It's different. It's way different. And I think a lot of it has to do with the NCAA scouting rules that Nebraska now has to follow with coaches out on the road. Nebraska sent a couple guys out last week. Mosey was in Oklahoma. Williams was up in South Dakota. There's 2 more days, out of the 33 total that they get now. And they're gonna kind of keep the rest of those guys, rest of those visits later because they don't have in-home visits anymore in December. So they've got to get back out and see those guys later on in November, have the conversations about, letter of intent and how things work and blah, blah, blah. And I think, with the JUCO guys, what really hurts them is that a lot of these schools are 95+% of the way, done with their class and recruiting by end of July, maybe middle of August. I think that there's always that margin, right? Like we're talking now about Jordan Taylor. We're talking about Nebraska, the willingness to kind of still take a couple guys later on, like if a Dawson Merritt wanted in, there's always kind of room to kind of find a guy here or there and guys that would be takes. You could go back and reevaluate the junior college level. I'm not sure, depending on if they're a bounce back, might come into the equation versus an academic guy directly out of high school, because you might as well then just wait it out and just see what else comes out in the portal as well. So the competition later on in the season when it comes to junior college and portal guys is going to be fierce.
We should probably wrap up with quarterback news, right, Bryan? Another offer went out. Trey Taylor is the name. Sounds like he had a great visit to Nebraska, and he's planning to come back. He said, "What's the lowdown on Trey Taylor?"
Yeah, Trey Taylor, big time 2027 quarterback out of the Chicago area, Carmel Catholic high school. First visit, obviously came to Lincoln, wanted to verify that Nebraska still didn't run the option. Dad obviously told him, I think you need to take a look at this kiddo, and they decided to take the visit, and he was blown away. So Dad was very encouraging about, taking a closer look at what Nebraska had to offer and taking a look to see what Matt Rule had kind of going in Lincoln. And then obviously the news was like when we talked on Sunday, yesterday afternoon, he was, I need to get back. I've got all these other places I want to go, LSU, and I can't remember all the other schools that he even mentioned. But then he basically got back to me on Sunday night saying, I'm already set. I'm already set to get back to Nebraska for the Wisconsin game, which is, I think, huge. The way that kind of sets up now for Nebraska, having, Raiola in the class for 2026, zeroing in now on a 2027 guy is massive, because those 2027 guys will start flying off the board early spring. And Nebraska, kind of had an ace in the hole, when it came to Dayton, and Dayton really has had a great season so far too. They're 5-1, by the way. They won again on Friday night. He uncorked a long one to that Jordan Taylor kid.
Yeah,
so
Brian, I said on Twitter that we should have saved the Patrick Mahomes comparisons for Dayton instead of Dylan.
Oh,
we jumped the gun.
Oh my God! Oh my goodness! I mean, big lefty, had a long throw, but yeah, I think things look really good right now for Nebraska. I mean, it's quite the 180 from what the tune I was singing about a month and a half ago, where things just didn't have any identity. There was no identity out there. Now they get their 2026 guy. Now it looks like they kind of zeroed in on 2027 guy, or at least 2027 guy seems to be kind of showing a lot of love for the Huskers very early on. So it's good news for the Huskers.
And on that front, Brian, it's maybe a little bit of a departure from the norm for Nebraska, and especially the staff, who is usually pretty good at getting in on the ground floor with guys and then losing them to maybe some bigger name, more successful programs. But for the offer list that Trey Taylor already has, for Nebraska to come in late, make this big of an impression, and get him back on campus before the end of the year, that speaks volumes about what he saw this last weekend.
There's no doubt about that. And I think Nebraska is playing catch up a little bit on the quarterback front, which makes sense based on, the hiring of a quarterback's coach and the change in the offensive coordinator, or the additional offensive coordinator that they named in January. I feel like maybe it kind of got caught up in all that. Plus, I think all the different things, like with needing to kind of get these guys in a little bit sooner. 2027 is kind of on that very hairy edge of guys that maybe they just weren't quite looking out towards, to where they were trying to get those guys to visit, earlier on, basically this spring. So I think that they're catching up in a lot of different places. And I think if they can get their quarterback, early spring versus waiting until September, like they did with Dayton for the 2026 group, it would really jumpstart the class very nicely next year.
It's Bryan Munson of Husker Online. He's our guest on our Aloe Fiber VIP line. Check out his stats column coming soon, 3 and Out on Wednesday. All at HuskerOnline.com. Worth the price, especially now that we're in football season. And, oh, wait, Brian's season really starts, November, December. So we're getting to Bryan Munson time. Early signing period is really just around the corner, Brian.
Absolutely, man. We're just, I tell you what is it? 12 weeks, 10 weeks away. So we're getting really close to crunch time right now for the Huskers.
Brian, as always, appreciate your time. Have a good week, man.
All right. Be good. See ya.